Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Digging Deeper moment number 172. We're so glad that you've joined us. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please remember to do so because it really helps us to spread messages like this one to others. Thank you very much. Today, we continue in our series called The Bible That Jesus Used. Last week, we saw that the Old Testament has the same books as the Jewish Bible has, used by Jesus. But the Christian Bible arranges them differently. Its arrangement follows that of the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. We also saw that the Bible Jesus used was arranged in three sections. The first being the Torah, or the Law. It has 5 books. Then we have the section of the Nevi'im, that's the prophets. It has 8 books. Then we have the Ketuvim, which is the writings. It has 11 books. But they're the same 39 books of our Old Testament. Now, while the books of the Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible are the same, the different arrangements actually affects our understanding of the story that these books are telling. And as we've seen, the Bible used by Jesus followed what's called the literary rational order. That's its arrangement is arranged according to literary principles. That is, writing principles. But we have to remember that these writing principles are Hebraic and not English. And I believe this is one of the most common mistakes made by preachers and commentators today when they interpret the Old Testament, because they often used English literary principles and the modern worldview to form their interpretations of the Old Testament text. And this skews our understanding of what the Scriptures are actually telling us. Now, as we've seen, the literary rational order divides the Old Testament documents into 3 groups: the Torah, or law, the prophets, and the writings. According to Dr. Peter Gentry in Kingdom Through Covenant, each of these 3 groups contains both history, that is narrative, plus another genre, that's another type of text. The name of each section is derived from the other genre. So that means that the Torah, being the law, it has history and it also has law, and that's why it's called law. So let me say this again, however, because this is extremely important. Each of the 3 groups contains both history, which is narrative, or prose, simple text, just take it as it is, plus another type of text. The name for each section then is derived from the other type or other genre of text. Therefore, the Torah consists of history plus instruction, that would be law. The prophets consist of history plus prophecy, thus being named the prophets. And the writings consist of history plus various other writings, hence its name, the writings. So right off the bat, we can notice something. Each of the 3 sections of the Jewish Bible contains history. This is because one of the overarching assumptions in the Bible is that the God of the Bible is involved with and intervenes in the affairs of this world. This means if we seek to remove the Bible from historical reality, as is being done in some schools of thought today, the story the Bible is telling is reduced to a myth. Take, for instance, the story of Abraham found in Genesis chapter 12. It says in verse 1, it says, "Now the Lord had said to Abram, 'Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you.'" The question is this history or is this a myth? The writer certainly intends for you to consider this as a historical event. Then there's Exodus chapter 14, verse 21, which says, "Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided." Does the writer Moses expect you to understand that this really happened? Or does he want you to believe it's simply a myth? No, he wants you to know that this actually happened. In fact, the absence of myth is a fundamental feature of the book of Genesis. Much debate has occurred over the nature of Genesis, especially Genesis chapter 1. Is it poetry, meaning is it symbolic? Or is it prose? That means historical narrative, or to be taken literally. While the literary rational arrangement of the Jewish Old Testament points to the book of Genesis being prose, that is historical narrative. And this is consistent with what we've seen in the past Digging Deeper moments, where we've shown that the creation account, the flood account, and the Tower of Babel, recorded for us in the book of Genesis, they're all devoid of myth. And Moses' account of these 3 historical events in chapters 1 through 12 actually demythologizes these ancient stories. He removes the myths. And even secular historians recognize the historical basis of many of these legends. In Genesis, however, Moses acknowledges the historicity of these legendary accounts while offering a new and biblical interpretation of these events. These things happened not as the ancient legends proposed, but as Moses records. Providing history and correcting myth is one of the driving focuses of the writers of both of the Old and New Testaments. The removal of myth and giving us history is central to what the Bible is recording for us. Now, as we look at the further arrangement of the biblical text, the Old Testament found in Jesus' Bible, or the Bible Jesus has used, Dr. Peter Gentry goes on to say that there's also another guiding principle for the books within each of the three sections, that of the Torah or law, the Nevi'im and the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings. The history books are arranged chronologically. In other words, whichever one was written first, second, third, etc. And the non-history books are arranged according to size, and they go from the longer to the shorter books. But that's where we'll have to pick it up next week. If this lesson helped you, please share it with a friend, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out our Sunday Morning Live podcast on either app or Spotify. And if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please take a moment to do that. It will help us greatly. Thank you. I hope to see you next week.